when we're talking about the human diet, we think a lot about the food, but what we consume in our drinking habits is arguably even more important than what we consume in solid food. Not only just drinking water and are we properly hydrated, but the other thing that we have to think about there is what are the calories and the nutrients that we are consuming through our drinks. And so I think that it's probably the easiest place to start with diet change is to start changing what we take in through drinking. So let's explore that for a minute. Let's think about some of our favorite things to drink. Fruit juices. Fruit juices are a common thing that people turn to when they're thirsty. And you may have noticed when you're drinking juices that 10 minutes later, you no longer feel hydrated and you're thirsty again. A lot of the reason for this is because of the high sugar content that's found in all fruit juices. If you think about the consistency of a sugary substance like maple syrup versus a substance like water, and you think about what those do when you spill them on the table and how they run across the table. Something that's sugary is going to be a lot slower moving, it's a lot thicker versus something like if you had spilled tea or water on the table. And when we consume those fruit juices and it drives our blood sugar up, that's what will happen to our blood is it becomes thicker and more viscous, which means it can't get into all the little capillaries and supply our organs and our muscles and all of our tissues with proper hydration. And so fruit juices, for that reason alone, are not a great choice for hydration. On top of that, sugar that we consume in drinks doesn't necessarily get registered in our brain as calories or as satiety. Even if we're going to a smoothie place and ordering a fruit smoothie that's got bananas and mangoes and oranges and all of these high sugar fruits, and we think that we're doing something good for our health, what we see is that we take in this huge load of sugar through what we're drinking. And because we're drinking it and because it's dissolved sugar and our body doesn't have to go through any complex process to break it down, that sugar is released into our bloodstream really quickly. Within 15, 20 minutes of consuming it, that sugar has all entered our bloodstream. And so it puts our body into a crisis where it says, I have got to get this sugar out of here. And because that sugar is coming in really quickly in one shot, our body tends to put out this huge amount of insulin and kind of overshoot the mark. And so what we get is reactively, now our blood sugar comes down to where it's below a normal blood sugar. And when we get below normal blood sugar, what happens is everything in our system goes into crisis and says, okay, now I need calories put in. So not only does the sugar that you're consuming in the drink not register, but it actually drives the desire to put more food in. And so it tends to drive obesity, it tends to drive inflammatory processes, and it tends to cause us to consume a lot more calories in a given day than we would ever consume if we weren't drinking sugary drinks. Soda. We could talk about the evils of soda for a whole entire day, I think. People who drink even one can of soda a day have an 85% increased chance of developing type 2 diabetes. That's fairly significant, and part of that's due to the cycle that I just talked about with fruit juices. You may be tempted to think, well, what if I drink a diet soda? Then I'm not going to go on that blood sugar cycle. Well, interestingly enough, they find that diet sodas cause an even stronger predisposition to developing diabetes. All our digestive processes start in our mouth. And so our whole body, when it tastes that sweet taste, begins to respond and get ready for the load of sugar that it's about to receive. And when it doesn't receive that load of sugar, you've already started to secrete the insulin, and so you end up driving your blood sugar down. Then that sets you up to crave food to bring the blood sugar back up. And so you end up seeing that cycling still happen. And in addition to that, the artificial sweeteners that are used in diet sodas, which is mainly aspartame, are really neurotoxic. When aspartame was first introduced to the FDA, every single doctor on the board that studied it said that they were opposed to aspartame being approved for food because it was carcinogenic and a known neurotoxin. That's great. So if we're talking about brain health, the worst thing that we could do is put in aspartame. That's a known neurotoxin that has all sorts of negative impacts on the brain and the entire physiology. One of my favorite things to drink in the morning, coffee. Coffee is a diuretic. It's a mild diuretic. As we know, you drink your coffee and you run to the bathroom for multiple reasons usually. So it is not optimal for hydration, but it does not necessarily detract from our hydration either. There are people, I remember my kids talking about one of their teachers who the entire day had a cup of coffee in his hand, and I think it was all he ever drank was coffee. And he survived. But ideally, we aren't using our coffee for hydration. Now, just to step back, when we're talking coffee consumption, we can get into the same problem if we're drinking sweetened coffee drinks. We are taking in calories that our body does not recognize as calories. So when I say coffee, I mean black coffee with some half and half or cream and no sugar. Tea is another drink that a lot of us enjoy consuming regularly. Black tea has the same diuretic effects as coffee because of the caffeine content, and so it isn't a good choice for hydration. Herbal tea can be hydrating. It depends a little bit on what the herbal combination is. There are some herbal teas that specifically are mild diuretics, and that's what they're used for. So if you're going for hydration, I would stay away from things like parsley tea or red raspberry leaf tea. But some of the other flavored teas can be a really good option, especially in the winter when it's cold. Sometimes warm water is easier to consume. I think most of us struggle as the weather gets cold to keep our hydration up. And so bringing in some herbal teas can be a really good way to stay hydrated as we go into the colder months. Next, I want to touch on bubbly drinks. Nowadays, we have all sorts of hint of fruit drinks that are available with a little bit of carbonation. Ideally, we want to get off of the carbonation because the carbonic acid binds with calcium and it can cause problems with bone density, health of our teeth, various other problems. But if that's, an in-between stage that needs to be hit to make it easier to get off of sugary drinks, then it's certainly the healthier choice of the two. And so as we begin to switch into healthier hydration choices and we start swapping out our sugary drinks and our caffeinated drinks in favor of water, some of the changes that we will see is we should see sharper memory and focus. It'll reduce some of the brain fog, see gigantic benefits in our musculoskeletal system. I have time and again seen people take away chronic pain just by coming into a state of adequate hydration in their body. You'll notice that you have an increased energy output, and so overall, you should see a significant change in your sense of well-being as you move into a state of being chronically hydrated rather than chronically dehydrated.